Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today's video is based around a more diverse detail on a more far gone Mazda 6 that's in much need of some detailing restoration work. However, this isn't exactly your standard detail, as only half of the car will be actually decontaminated, corrected and protected. So let me explain how this 50-50 detail came about, how it's going to work and what the whole point of it is. The owner's a friend and colleague that, as much as he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met, he's obviously not a car guy to say the least. And his 10-year-old Mazda 6 is perhaps one of the worst maintained cars I've ever come across. Basically, it's not been washed for years, let alone detailed in any form. So I put forward to him that his car really needs a bit of love in the way of a detail. During a quick visual inspection and walk around the car, I commented that this car would be an amazing candidate to show the before and after results of what's achievable in the way of detailing and paint correction. Then I jokingly suggested that we should divide and mask half of the car and leave it as it is, while the other half of the car undergoes a high-end paint correction and protection process. To cut a long story short, it turned out that he was more than keen to go ahead with it and excited to document the process and see the results. The way it's going to work is that the whole car will get a much needed intensive foam and hand wash. But after that stage, the car will have a line of masking tape applied, dividing the vehicle bumper to bumper symmetrically in half. The left hand side will also be masked in plastic during the remaining decontamination stage, and only the right hand side of the car will be completely decontaminated, corrected and protected, with the masking tape line in place to show the amazing dramatic difference from one side of the vehicle to the other. The whole aim of this Project Mazda 6, once the joke became a reality, is that we realised what a great opportunity it could be to learn, test, monitor and educate both ourselves and others on so many aspects of detailing in quite a visually powerful and brutally honest display that clearly shows the ongoing results between corrected and protected paint versus neglected and weathered paint. So besides just a visual difference of both sides of the car, which in itself would be an amazing marketing and educational tool for any detailer, a focus will also be placed on monitoring the results during the maintenance washes in the up and coming months. And for those of you who saw my video on the Audi S3, this video will once again be focused on testing detailing products and techniques, with further testing done on some pre-used products, as well as a few newer ones I haven't tried as yet, or prototype products that once again I can't give you a name or brand, but I can let you follow the testing phase of them. So with all that said and done, let me talk you through this somewhat unique detailing process, which was quite an epic journey, mostly due to the poor state of the vehicle and the high expectations I'd placed on myself. So after reality set in on what I was about to tackle in the way of years upon years of dirt and grime, the first area to address were the wheels. A pre-treatment of POORBOYS APC and degreaser for the tyres and wheel wells was followed by CONCOURS Purge wheel cleaner sprayed onto the rims in a generous manner and left to soak into the accumulation of brake dust and road grime. This quickly turned into a vibrant brown and purple display of dirt and iron particles chemically reacting to the degreaser and wheel cleaner as it began to break down almost a decade of traffic film and brake dust buildup. After a few minutes of letting the wheel cleaners do their thing, the rims were pressure rinsed down along with much of the grime. But on neglected rims such as these, a follow-up manual clean was clearly needed. With the second application of both products and the use of some wheel arch and wheel wooler brushes, a SWISSVAK wheel brush and a CASCADE microfiber wash mitt, the remaining stubborn bonded grime was all but gone. One thing I'll add is that the more and more I've been using Purge to clean rims, the more I've been discovering that it really is such a great and unique product. It's not to say that there aren't plenty of effective wheel cleaners out there, but I can say I've never used one that not only works this effectively at breaking down brake dust and road grime, but also has fantastic foaming and increased lubrication that provides such a safe cleaning action when you use it with the wheel brushes and mitts. Also, I know a lot of guys tend to judge wheel cleaners by how strong the purple colour reaction of the iron remover is, and many people do use specific iron removers for that purpose. But the truth is that iron particles are just one part of the contamination that affects car rims. Using a wheel cleaner that can also address road tar and traffic film accumulation and still provide you with lubricants won't turn as purple as a pure iron removal product. But I guarantee you it'll work better if you judge it on how easily, safely and effectively it cleans the rims rather than how quickly or strongly it turns a purple colour. During the pre-inspection stage, I noticed how bad the door, boot and bonnet jams were. So with the use of some masking tape and plastic sheeting, all the jams were also given a pressure rinse and brush cleaning with the SWISSVAK wheel brush and POORBOYS APC in degreaser. Especially on the boot jam area, this was actually quite an effort, as once the bulk of the looser leaves and twigs was blasted away, the dirt underneath had an almost compressed clay dirt consistency that was quite a bit of work to remove completely. After having another look at the engine bay, I also couldn't let it go uncleaned, even though it wasn't meant to be part of this detail. So an hour or so was spent, once again, pressure rinsing it down, and then killing two birds with one stone by testing Auto Finesse's Verso all-purpose cleaner and playing around with some dilutions, as well as testing a few newer prototype smaller cleaning brushes. So with the Auto Finesse Verso APC, I found that the initial 1 part concentrate to 2 parts water was a little too light to tackle this engine bay. Though for an engine bay with lesser grime or for interior cleaning, that would have most likely been a good dilution ratio. In the end, I found that a 1:1 ratio was far more effective for this particular job, and even using it straight for a few more stubborn areas gave the best results. The prototype smaller cleaning brushes I tried and compared to my much loved SWISSVAK wheel brush were actually really great, being able to store a lot of the APC and distribute it evenly as I cleaned from one section to the next. They seem quite gentle with their soft bristles, yet really effective in lifting the dirt and grime. In the end, the engine bay did require quite a bit of cleaning, rinsing and re-cleaning, as the layers of dirt and grime needed to be tackled in stages, removing a layer at a time. So after spending well over 2 hours on just the rims, door jambs and engine bay, I'd yet to even start washing and cleaning the actual paint. The decontamination stage began with a pre-soak foam using CONCOURS Snow Plus. After 5 minutes of allowing the detergent to begin breaking down and softening the various contaminants of dirt, bug splatter, bird poo droppings and a lot of things that I was a little unsure and scared of, a follow-up pressure rinse was used to blast away all of the looser grime that had previously called this Mazda its home. So next, by using the 2-bucket wash method, once again with Snow Plus as the car wash detergent and the CLOUDBURST microfiber wash mitt for the top and mid panel sections, followed by the CASCADE wash mitt for the lower panel sections of the paint, the Mazda was given a much needed top to bottom cleansing hand wash. I've talked a little in the past about always adapting to the situation at hand, and on a car like this that's so dirty and poorly maintained, it's difficult to get all of the dirt and grime off by simply following a standard washing procedure. Now sometimes it can be beneficial to use more aggressive pre-cleaners to loosen and dislodge the grime, but in the case of this car, I simply washed each panel twice, and that actually did the trick extremely well without having to resort to more aggressive methods and products. The car was then given a quick pat down dry with a microfiber towel, and then it was time to mask and divide this Mazda 6 into two. So with the use of some 3M exterior masking tape and some masking plastic sheeting, the left hand side of the car was completely masked off and covered up. So just like on the Audi S3 in my previous video, and honestly most cars I'm decontaminating at the moment, CONCOURS Purify was used to chemically treat and break down the iron fallout and traffic film buildup, as well as provide amazing lubrication for the claying stage. So one by one, each panel of the car was sprayed with Purify and given a couple of minutes to allow the product to work, as it turned a purple colour, indicating that it's breaking down the iron fallout. Then this clay mitt that I've been testing on quite a few cars was once again used in conjunction with Purify to both lubricate the surface and dislodge the enormous amount of bonded contaminants. This process was repeated as needed to address such a severe level of paint contamination that saw the surface go from feeling like sandpaper to an almost silky smooth touch. Then each panel was pressure rinsed down to remove any standing particles and remaining residue, and after the whole car had been treated, the vehicle was dried with the Tempest high-tech microfiber towel, and then all the seams and crevices were blown out with compressed air. One thing I did want to elaborate on is what I consider to be the new generation of clay lubricants such as CONCOURS Purify and CARPRO IMMOLUBE. So in the past, many of us would have used things like water, car soap, and then polymer-based quick detailers as clay lubricants. Now I have discussed in past videos why polymer-based products aren't exactly the best clay lubricants for various reasons. But I just want to touch on how the newer generation of clay lubricants that use better suited surfactants to create the lubrication rather than polymer technology work a little differently. The main difference is the increased lubrication that to a certain degree actually prevents the iron fallout particles from bonding to the clay. So you may look at the clay bar after you've done clay in a section and think it hasn't picked up anything, but then you feel the paint and it's actually smooth, so the clay has worked. The real difference is once again that the actual lubrication in these products is so good and so much safer that it actually causes the clay bars or clay mitts to mostly dislodge the iron particles from the paint, rather than sticking to the clay bar and causing more scratches as you continue to clay. And to remove them from the paint, you simply rinse down the panel. So if it's your first time using Purify or IMMOLUBE, you may think it's not working, but I just wanted to explain that it just works a little differently. The IPA or alcohol-based wipe down, which I did go into greater depths about in my last video, talking about the importance of this product and stage, was done using CONCOURS Clarity to prepare the paint for compounding and polishing in the next correction stage. And just to let you know that even though only half the car was fully decontaminated and prepared for correction, it took almost twice as long as most cars I do. Now honestly, this isn't the worst car condition-wise that I've detailed in the past, but it is the worst car condition-wise that I've ever done high-end paint correction work on. So although I've had worse, I've never tried to go far with a car so far gone. After a closer inspection of the clean bare paint and with the help of a paint thickness gauge, it became abundantly clear that I was dealing with two different types of paint on this car. The original Mazda paint was still present on the bonnet, roof, front quarter panel and both the front and rear bumpers, but it was extremely thin, with paint thickness readings as low as 60 microns or 1.2 mils, but about 75 microns on average. It was though pretty much what I'd expect from a Mazda. And for those of you that don't know, original Mazda paint is by far the thinnest paint applied by any car manufacturer in my experience. It would have been nicer to have readings closer to 90 microns or so, which is about as good as Mazda gets. But that just means that I'll need to be a little more careful and perhaps flexible in how far I pursue correction on the thinner areas of this paint. Now on the car doors, rear quarter panel and boot lid, the paint is extremely thick, with readings as high as 400 microns or 16 mils, but on average about 200 microns. Now overall, it's very clear that these panels have been repaired and repainted, but it's actually a pretty good repair job, better than most I come across, and even the orange peel is quite a close match. But what this means is that I have two different paint types to address that'll most likely require two different approaches. So on to doing my test section, starting with the original paint and using the bonnet as my testing area. Now just like the previous video on the Audi S3, I'll be trialling a few different compounds and pads and talking you through the results I'm getting and seeing with each test section. On this particular mid-grey to warm silver metallic paint, I know it's hard to see some of the defects and results on camera as well as you would on black paint, but I'll do my best to talk you through what I was seeing in person during the filming. On average, I'd say that Mazda paint is usually on the softer side, but not exactly as soft as many other Japanese cars such as Hondas or certain Nissans. So my starting point is going to be a medium or one-step compound in the way of SCHOLL Concepts S20 Black with an intermediate or light cutting pad in the way of the SCHOLL Concepts Blue Spider pad. For those of you who have seen a few of my past videos, you'll know that this compound and pad selection is a combination that I use frequently, as it's not overly aggressive but still quite capable in achieving great results in many circumstances. Now quite honestly, the paint is really bad, so after a set of passes with the S20 on the Blue Spider pad, it didn't really make much of an impact on eliminating those defects. But I can however see that the finish is actually improved and really exceptional, considering I'm not using a finishing polish or pad. So what that is indicating to me is that this Mazda paint may be a little harder than I was expecting from a Japanese paint. But the other thing to consider is that there is quite a bit of oxidation or dead paint sitting on top that is preventing me from getting to the scratches and defects that lay beneath. So my next step is to use the Blue Spider pad once again, but this time with a heavier cutting compound. The one I'm using is another prototype compound I've been testing, so I can't give you a name or brand. However, in the way of usability, in comparison to S20, it's slightly dusting and harder to spread throughout the panel section. The lubrication is also feeling inadequate, and it seems to dry quickly, causing a bit of pad hopping due to friction. But on the side of the results, I'm definitely seeing more defect removal with a better leveling ability, though the finish is nowhere near as good as S20. Next, I'm trying the last cut compounding glaze with the Lake Country fibre cutting pad. Just like S20, the user friendliness is great, with little to no dusting and great lubrication. In the way of results, the cut or defect removal is by far the best so far. but I know that part of this is the fact that I used a microfiber cutting pad instead of a foam intermediate or light cutting pad. But a little surprising is that the finish is just as good as S20 on the foam pad. Now, I really wouldn't have guessed that on this Mazda paint, but it just goes to show that you just never know until you try, and that each paint, regardless of make or manufacturer, can be quite different. So seeing that microfiber has the potential to both cut and finish to a great level on this paint, I want to test these pads with a couple more compounds to see what results I can get and what further information I can gather. Next is Detailing Kingdom's Vision Heavy Cut Compound with the same Lake Country microfiber pad. I gotta say, I still absolutely love the user experience of this compound. With its buttery texture and great lubrication, that really is a pleasure to use. Now yet again, I've gotten what I consider a pretty decent finish with Vision here, which I'm actually pleasantly surprised with. But I'm just not seeing much in the way of defect removal compared to the last cut or the prototype compound, but it's still a step up on S20 in that respect. So for a third attempt with the same microfiber pad, I gave 3D 501 cutting compound a go. From a user-friendly point, it really sits somewhere in the middle, with perhaps just slight dusting, but quite a reasonable wipe off and lubrication. In relation to cut, it's once again somewhere in the middle in comparison to the other compounds here, but where it falls a little short on this paint is in the finish, with quite a bit of haze and micro marring left behind. Now so far, the only real success I'm having is with the last cut on the Lake Country microfiber pad, but the panel section still isn't to a level I'm completely satisfied with after just one set of passes. So I want to see if a second set is going to achieve the results I want. So using my smaller 3-inch polisher, I'm going to split the section into two parts and do some more finer edge work to see if that gives me the results I'm after. I'd actually say the paint is near perfect with this second set, with great defect removal and a near perfect finish. So a couple of passes using the larger polisher to tackle the flatter areas and the smaller polisher for the edge work and more intricate sections should be a great all-round combination on this original Mazda paint. One last thing I did also want to try was CARPRO Clear Cut with the microfiber pad. Apart from its cut, I'm also interested to know how well it finishes down on this paint with a microfiber pad. Overall, Clear Cut will tend to dust more with microfiber than foam pads, but it's really not a major issue as long as you don't work it too long. Now the correction in this section is actually near perfect after this final test with Clear Cut. And although the finish is also surprisingly good, it's still not quite as good as the previous top section with the last cut. So it looks to me that I get faster defect removal with Clear Cut, but a slightly better finish with the last cut. At this stage, I'm going to try a second stage with a finer polish and pad in the way of SCHOLL Concepts S40 and the red ShineMate pad. Looking back at the footage, I can see that the camera is really blowing out the light on my handheld defect spotting light, so it's washing away much of what I could see with my actual eyes. But I can tell you that on these last two sections I worked with the last cut and Clear Cut, the finish is more than good and completely acceptable, as it's really difficult to pick up any haze or micro marring. However, previous experience tells me that just because I can't see any obvious haze or compounding marks on this particular grey or silvery metallic paint, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, or that the paint can't be further improved. Now just because any existing slight haze, which is actually just super fine scratches, is really all that remains, a very fine polish such as S40 on a finishing pad used in a very light jeweling manner is exactly what's needed here to ever so gently refine and eliminate those micro scratches. I'm hoping you can see that although the haze was so very minor, the difference after a jeweling stage in this particular circumstance has transformed this grey silvery paint into an almost golden colour. This is what the paint should really look like at its absolute best clarity, meaning there is no slight haze or marring that is preventing the light from cleanly bouncing and reflecting off its surface. In general, we look at black or dark non-metallic paints as being harder to correct. But if the paint was a flat black, the haze would have been so much more obvious. The fact that it's a metallic silvery grey means that it's actually so much harder to identify any minor haze, and so much easier to believe that you've gotten the paint perfect when in reality, compared to what can be achieved, you may have stopped short and never unlocked the paint's full potential. So just to sum up, what my conclusions are with this whole testing stage on the bonnet and what I'm going to move forward with is the last cut compounding glaze on the Lake Country microfiber pad, followed by Shell Concepts S40 on the red Shine Made pad for the original painted panels on this Mazda 6. The truth is that apart from clear cut, I just didn't have much success with the other compounds on this particular paint, and the less aggressive foam pad just wasn't capable of tackling these more severe defects. In reality, clear cut would have actually been a little faster at removing the defects than the last cut. But the other thing to consider is that I'm honestly a little scared with how thin this paint is. And I know that even though it may take a little longer with the last cut compound, it will be less aggressive and it'll keep the heat down with its fantastic lubrication and just be a little safer in this particular circumstance where I don't have much paint to work with. If I had an extra 10 or 15 microns to work with, I would have gone with clear cut. But as thin as the paint is on this bonnet, it's actually a lot thinner on the roof, as low as 60 microns as I mentioned before. So although I'm not as worried on the bonnet, I'm going to be extra cautious and light-handed on the roof, only doing the bare minimum to clean up some light oxidation and swirls with no more than one set of passes. So onto my test section for the repainted panels. Now, as I honestly was quite a bit behind on this whole detailing job on this Mazda, as the decontamination stage took much longer than expected, and I've also spent quite a bit of time on the bonnet testing compounds and pads, I needed to progress a little faster. So I had to cut short my product testing and quite simply find a good combination that I could progress with. Plus, I intend on restoring the headlight, which is so bad and completely fogged, and I also want to give the rims a polish as they really need it, as do the rubber and plastic trims that really will take a bit of extra time to restore. Luckily enough, clear cut on the Lake Country fiber cutting pad worked brilliantly on what turned out to be a slightly harder paint than the original Mazda paint. And I was also able to knock down a little of the orange peel, so it actually ended up matching the original paint much closer. However, the second stage did require more of a change to address what the paint was responding best to. S40 on the red Shine Made pad that I used on the original paint seemed to work great in some of the resprayed panels, whereas on others I ended up using the Lake Country orange polishing pad, as well as the Shell Concepts orange spider pad with CONCOURS finesse polish, which gave a much better and quicker results on those certain panels. But it just goes to show you that although there is a certain consistency with original car paint, really anything goes when it comes to custom paint, and that's just something you have to deal with a little differently and address. So with my product and pad combinations worked out on both the original and resprayed paint surfaces, I proceeded to masking up the car's plastic and rubber trims, and then basically getting down to the business of restoring this car's paint. Starting with the roof and my 3-inch mini polisher, I began doing the finer edge and corner work to get the best possible defect removal or correction in those tighter areas. Now overall, the edge work and using the smaller 3-inch pads usually takes twice as long as working the flat panels with my larger 5-inch pads. The reason is that you should always decrease the size of your section polishing area to match up with the smaller pad size you're using. So in general, the 2x2 foot area you'd normally work with a 5 or 6 inch pad should be reduced to a 1x1 foot area for the 3 or 4 inch pads. This comes down to maximising and getting the most efficiency out of your paint correction process. So where you can actually achieve great efficiency working larger areas with larger pads, you need to work smaller areas with smaller pads to achieve that same level of correction. And another tip I can offer is that the easiest way to increase your cut or leveling ability without changing to a different compound or pad is to simply work smaller sections. So once the edge work was all done with the mini polisher, I then switched to my larger dual action polisher to complete the larger, flatter main sections of the roof. Now, like I said before, I'm basically only doing one set of passes during the cutting stage of the roof, as the paint is just plain and simple too thin to do any more than that. But luckily, the defects on the roof aren't as bad as the ones on the bonnet, which I've got a little more paint to work with and can do an extra stage of passes if needed. The second and finishing stage was completely done with the larger polisher, also working larger sections in the finer finishing or jeweling stage. I've mentioned this before in a few past videos, but in general you want less aggression with the finishing stage of polishing. So doing things like slowing your machine speed down, decreasing pressure and increasing your arm movement, as well as working larger areas, all reduce aggression and generally allow for a better finish. Now, that doesn't mean that this method or technique will always work best for finishing paint, as sometimes on softer or more finicky paints, it's best to work smaller sections and reduce your passes and even increase machine speed and pressure at times. In the end, the paint is going to decide what it likes and needs, and it's up to you to try and read your results and respond to them by adapting your technique and even troubleshooting with some other polishers and pads. Now, I'm not going to be coating the glass once I'm done, so I'm going to use CARPRO Essence to both polish it and give it a deep clean to remove some water spotting and grime buildup, which will also add a little protection to the finish. I'm also going to use my mini dual action polisher with a 4-inch light cutting foam pad to address the tighter corners and edges of the windscreen, which is where most of the water spots and gunk buildup is. The bonnet is more or less going to be tackled just like the roof was. The only real difference, as I mentioned before, is that the bonnet has a few more deeper scratches and bird poo etchings that will take a second or third pass to remove, or at least largely reduce in severity. So just to confirm and sum up what's been done and what's yet to come, the roof bonnet and front quarter panel and both the front and rear bumpers that still have the original Mazda paint have been or will be compounded using the last cut compounding glaze with the Lake Country fibre cutting pads on both the mini and full size 12mm ShineMate dual action polishers. But being that the paint is so thin on most of these panels, a balance of cut and restrain is needed to address the paint, yet still be as gentle and cautious as possible. However, on the boots, pillar arch, rear quarter panels and doors, which contain the re-sprayed custom paint, CARPRO Clear Cut will be used for the initial cutting stage, and since the paint thickness is more than adequate on those panels, a higher level of defect removal can be achieved quite safely. The second stage will be done using a combination of SCHOLL Concepts S40 and CONCOURS Finesse polishers with a combination of foam polishing and finishing pads to best address the inconsistent custom paint. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm going to be restoring the right headlight, which is pretty badly oxidized to say the least. Now, in many circumstances, this does require sanding to firstly remove the damaged clear coat. But on some occasions such as this one, where the clear coat is on the softer side, or just plainly almost completely worn out, an extremely coarse compound such as SCHOLL Concepts S0 can eliminate the need for sanding and will make the whole process much quicker. So using S0 with the SCHOLL white spider pad, I'm dividing the headlight into 3 sections and doing about 2 to 3 sets of passes in each section, which is actually working quite well. I've also put 2 layers of the 3M exterior painter's tape to protect the surrounding paint, which is quite a strong tape that can actually withstand sanding the headlights or a compound like S0 so that you won't damage the paint around the headlights. For the sharp edge in the corner of the headlight, I'm using my rotary polisher with a small extension bar and a ShineMate 2-inch green foam pad to access and correct that tight corner that is too small for my 3-inch pad. Now, a compound like S0 is really like liquid sandpaper, so it does leave extremely coarse compounding marks that do need some extra time and stages to refine. But in comparison to refining sanding marks, it still will be a much quicker process. My second stage with the Lake Country fibre cutting pad and with CARPRO clear cut was used to remove those severe compounding marks and begin to restore clarity. The final step was using the Lake Country orange foam HDO polishing pad with CONCOURS Polish Finesse. As you can hopefully see, the difference is quite dramatic. And I'm sure at night the owner is going to see a much better projection in this right hand light compared to the left. Now, there is quite a lot of pitting in this lens, most likely from stone chips and a couple of deeper nicks or scratches, that sanding with some coarser grits of sandpaper would have most likely improved further, but still not entirely eliminated in my experience. So that could have been an option to further improve this headlight. Now, I'd like to use that last point to make another point for any professional detailers watching. I've no doubt that there are so many great and talented detailers out there that do really care and have pride in their work. So sometimes it's hard to find that balance or know when to stop or move on when you're looking for something close to perfection in your results. But unfortunately, if you're running a business, budgeting, and having to meet deadlines, you have to know how to balance your workload in order to achieve the best overall results for your customers. So the question in this case would be, is it best for me to spend another hour or so getting this headlight, which is already restored to a great condition, to a near perfect condition? Or would my time be better spent perhaps putting that extra hour into polishing the rims, restoring the plastic trims, or perhaps even giving the customer a complimentary interior clean? So apart from having skill, passion and pride in your work, you sometimes need to step back and look at the bigger picture of where your time is best spent to deliver the best overall results in the time frame you have available. With all the paint correction work just about complete, a final quick polish in the door handle wells was done using the AutoTriz Nano polishing extension with a Nano stranded wool pad and CARPRO clear cut. I have done a previous video on the AutoTriz polisher, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with this tool, it's a rotary polisher extension that screws into any standard rotary buffer, and you simply turn on the rotary to drive and turn the AutoTriz extension. It's really fantastic for areas such as these, as well as around car badges and really any super tight or thin curved areas that no other polisher can fit. Next was giving the rims a polish. I actually did try to get some of the more permanently bonded grime off by claying the rims, followed by using a tar remover and a wax and grease remover. But in the end, that grime just honestly wouldn't budge. So for those of you watching and the owner of this car, that's what happens when you don't wash your rims for 10 years. So although polishing the outer face of the rims will actually remove some of the scratches and defects, as well as restore clarity and gloss, it'll more importantly remove this baked on wheel grime and give them a deep surface clean, which is vital for the wheel coating I'll be applying once I'm done polishing. For this step, I use my RUPES IBRID Nano Polisher in rotary mode with the 1-inch backing plate attachment using a ShineMate microfiber pad and CARPRO clear cut as the compound. Now although these rims look like a pretty standard 5-spoke rim, you can see that each spoke has quite a few indentations, which actually made them quite a lengthy process to polish. Thankfully though, as per most original car rims, the clear coat paint was on the harder side, and a single stage using this combination was enough to both cut and finish down well. The great thing about using a rotary with smaller pads such as these is that it's generally far easier to finish down great, without any holograms, as long as you keep the machine speed down, don't apply too much pressure, and keep the pad as flat to the paint as possible. I'll also let you know that I removed and took home the badly damaged center caps to give them a quick sanding and respray with some silver metallic paint, which did make a really big difference to the overall finish of the rims. So with the rim polishing complete, a final wipe down with clarity, and it was time to coat them. I showed the results of CONCOURS PYRO wheel coating in my last maintenance video on the Audi S3, but I didn't show the application of the coating, which I'll go through now. So to put it plainly, this is the easiest coating I've ever applied. It's really just so forgiving and almost impossible to get wrong. However, be sure to wear gloves and treat it as you would any other glass or ceramic coating. So the very general application is to either spray it directly onto the rim or an applicator pad of your choice, spread it evenly over the rim and then wipe it off. So in essence, it's a spray on, spread around and wipe off procedure. But what makes it so easy to apply is that you don't need to worry about flashing times or hard wipe offs, as the coating gives you a lot of leeway in that you can wipe it on and wipe it straight off, or give it a couple of minutes and you're still fine. But obviously, just don't apply it and walk away, or come back hours later or the next day to remove it, and you'll be fine. It's also a water-friendly coating, So if there's a little water remaining on the rim when you're coating it, it won't cause any issues whatsoever. Now I've been testing PYRO coating in the last few months, and so far it's showing amazing resistance to cleaning chemicals, and it's holding up and reacting very well, and making the cleaning process a real breeze. But I will be continuing to monitor it, and I'll also have an update on this Mazda soon, which will also be testing PYRO and seeing how it's holding up. So with all the paint, lights and rims corrected, and also a final IPA wipe down with clarity, it was finally time for applying the paint correction in the way of Nova Pro glass coating. Now yet again, I did discuss this coating and show its results in my last two videos, but the largest difference this time around was the weather and how it influenced the coating's application. So last time around it was about 40 degrees Celsius, which made the coating flash and also cure extremely quick, meaning that it was almost a wipe on and wipe off procedure, and within an hour or so it had already hardened and cured to the point that it would no longer accept a second layer. However, this time around it was a much more pleasant 25 degree or so day, which increased the flash time, meaning I had to give it about 2 minutes or so before wiping and leveling down the coating. I'll also let you know that the coldest day I applied Nova Pro was last year at about 10 degrees Celsius, and in that instance it took about 5 or 6 minutes to flash. So I know there's still quite a bit of uncertainty for many people applying coatings and knowing how to judge the flash time, as it's difficult at times to visually see when you need to wipe and level down the coating. Depending on the paint colour and the lighting you have, you can sometimes see the coating almost evaporating or dispersing off the paint, going from a liquidy or oily look to a streaky look, which is an indication that it's flashing. The other and most important indication is how the coating feels and reacts when you're wiping it down. In general, if you wipe the coating and it just continues to smear over the panel, it's an indication that you're wiping too soon, as it still hasn't flashed. But if you wipe the coating and it's really tacky and sticky and really hard to wipe off, that's an indication that you've waited too long and it's already begun its curing stage. But if you wipe and it feels easy and the paint looks clean with just a little effort, that's an indication that you've got your flash and wipe time spot on. For coatings that can be layered, there's also indications that let you know if you waited too long to apply the second or third layer, or if you haven't waited long enough. So if you start applying a second layer to the coating and it feels very tacky when you're applying it, as well as when you're wiping and leveling it down, that's usually an indication that you haven't waited long enough to allow the coating's first layer to begin its primary or first hardening stage. So what's happening there is that you're at least in part removing the first layer you applied with the carrier solvents contained in the coating, which is why it feels overly sticky as you're lifting and removing the first layer. But if you apply your second layer and the coating looks like it's almost beading on top of the first layer and just won't flash or bond to the paint, that's a clear indication that you've waited too long to apply your second layer, and the first layer has already cured and become hydrophobic to the point it'll no longer accept a further layer. In general, a second or third layer should only feel just slightly more tacky than the first, but apart from that, it should pretty much work just as the first layer did. So with the paint coating applied, and given a few hours to slightly harden and set, the last final stage was restoring and protecting the plastic and rubber trims. For this particular job, I decided to try POLISHANGEL's Black Bond, which is a trim restorer and a durable coating in one. Now all the trims were given a thorough clean during the decontamination stage, but they were also given a final clean and wipe down with clarity in preparation. What I found with Black Bond is that it's best to be a little more generous with your first application, as on weathered trims like these, they really soaked up the coating after about 10 minutes or so. At that stage, some were given a second application, while others didn't need it depending on how badly sun damaged they were. By all accounts, Black Bond looks, feels and reacts like a true nano or glass coating, but just takes a little longer to cure and set, which is actually great, as it gives you time to clean up any residue around the trims before it cures. I'll also add that this is the very first coating I've ever used that actually smells nice. Now, I don't suggest you purposely smell it, as you can still get a sense of its strong solvent serious aroma. But there is a hint of something pleasant in the mix, which is a first for me with any true coating. Also, it does look wet and glossy on application, but once it dries, it actually looks really great and just adds richness to the trims rather than over glossing or changing their appearance. So with this 50-50 detail done and dusted, I'll leave you with the final footage and images so you can judge the results for yourself. But one last point I'd like to leave you with is the importance of these product testing and experimental details from my point of view. The truth is that on many occasions, most detailers will work on a car and hopefully deliver great results to their customers, but perhaps never see that car again. But what's so important and educational with these particular details is that they allow me to not only test products and techniques during the car's initial detail, but also allow me to follow those results in the future to see what worked best and what perhaps didn't stand the test of time, and how to address and improve on it. So in other words, it's not just about me using a method or product on my own cars and judging it solely based on those circumstances, but rather testing these methods, techniques, and products on a larger scale that are going to be exposed to different environments and levels of care and maintenance, so a more well-rounded conclusion can be made. In the end, information is knowledge, and the better and more objective that knowledge is, the greater the learning experience will be. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.